Hey, so you're thinking about upgrading your headlights to some LEDs, but you don't know which ones you should buy, and you've got like 5,000 options, am I right? Maybe you're thinking about sticking with the halogen or going to an HID projector. Well, I just bought the top 3 ranked LED replacements from Amazon during their Prime days. Now that I've had a chance to test them all out, I thought, hey, let's make a little comparison video. So, if you're struggling to decide on what you want to do, kick back, relax. I've already done all the hard work for you. I'm going to give you my honest opinion about all 3 of these options, as well as the standard halogen bulbs, and then you can form your own opinion off the data that I provide you. We'll go from there. So here's our test rig. Here's the standard light that we're comparing against. Here's the side where we're plugging in all the LEDs and the other standard bulb that we're testing. With the truck running and alternator charging, here's our low beam voltage, and here's our high beam voltage measured at the plug. So this is a shot of just the right hand side light on low beam setting, so we have something to compare the rest of the lights to. And then we'll go to the high beam setting here. It was a perfect night for this test. It was overcast, which made it pitch black, and there was no fog, so we had clear visibility. So now we're adding our lights in on the left side. So here's the standard halogens on low, and here they are on bright. You'll want to keep an eye on the gate and the phone pole in the background during this testing. Those are our main points of reference or comparison. So now we'll go to the LEDs, and here we'll want to pay attention to the cutoff lines. This one has a nice crisp cutoff line at the top. It's got the widest area of light on the low beam setting. On highs, has still that nice cutoff at the top, and it gets well over the top of that gate. And then we go to the JG. This one has a very narrow band of light, so I scored it really low for the low beam because on the bottom side of the light is where I'd like to be able to see. On the high beams, not so much, and it gets way far out there, so it scored okay on the high beams. On the Ovators, it has light everywhere on the low beams, and honestly, it's pretty sloppy, and I question what the oncoming traffic would think, but for the actual user, you get to see everything. All right, so now let's get into the unboxing, and wow, would you look at that? All 3 of these have the exact same type of boxes, except for they have different brand names and they come from different sellers. Pretty weird. So they all come in these black boxes. Some of them came with a plastic sheath over them. Some of them literally just came this box inside of an Amazon box, and that was it. But they're all inside this styrofoam here. They're well cushioned. A lot of them come with kind of a cheesy manual, some specs on them, pretty obvious stuff. Main thing here is these are all going to be plastic. That's kind of unfortunate because obviously plastic will fade over time, then you got to dink around with polishing it and all that. So this one here is from HW Star. It's got the cooling fins on the back, so I'm assuming this is aluminum. Here's your pigtail. It does have wire loom around it with some heat shrink at the end to help protect your wires against chafing. I will mention every headlight I got in this test has integrated daytime running lights as well as turn signals. So every one I have has the standard plug plus 2 additional wires. And this one is literally just the 2 lights. Again, this one just has a layer of styrofoam on top. Another plastic lens. They do have all these clear protective films on them so they don't get scratched. And then this one is what I'm calling the JG. Here you can see this one doesn't have any type of wire loom over it. It's a sealed light. You're not able to work on it. This one again is just the lights, nothing else included. Here's our last box. This is the smallest box. There's probably the most in this box, which is ironic. You'd think the bigger boxes would have more stuff in them. This one comes with some instructions. Now this one has all sorts of extra wires for running those daytime running lights and the turn signals. It's got some adapter harnesses for different style of plugs. The way the lights are actually packed in there, they're just facing each other with this little layer of styrofoam in between. I did like how those were packed better. This one has a nice loom over it. It goes into the housing, heat shrink here, your extra 2 wires. Out of all of them, this is my favorite. This has the cooling fins on the back, so 2 of them had it, 1 didn't. This is the Ovotor, again, plastic lens. So we get our other light and our other adapter harness. So honestly, you get the most out of this one. So to go through these and score all of these, I've come up with a 5-point system to distinguish between these because it's actually a really close race. At the time of filming, the HW Star listed for $90, I paid $72. These were the second most expensive and were one of 2 that sold for under $100. Amazon reviews no longer allow me to post what I paid in my reviews, so I'll say it here. They claimed all 3 of these lights were 30 or 40% off during Prime Days, but my suspicion is they mark prices up on items that are going to be on Prime Day deals a while in advance so that they can claim they are having major percentages off during Prime Days. When Prime Days end, they immediately switch the prices back to these hiked up prices, and they leave them there for a couple weeks in case you're suspicious and go back and check. But then they drop them back down to normal prices once you're no longer paying attention. That's just my theory. The JG lights were the most expensive. They listed for $150 at filming, and I paid $128. Although they only have 35 reviews, they have essentially a perfect 5-star rating, which made me believe you get what you pay for here. The Ovotor lights were the other pair under $100. They were listed at $85 during filming, and I paid $67. These were the cheapest option and almost exactly half the cost of the JG lights during Prime Days, and for this reason, I did not expect much performance from them. And based off the prices during filming and Prime Days, I awarded 4 points to HW Star, 4 points to the Ovotor, 2 points to JG, and 5 to the standard, because for a standard bulb, you can buy one for 10 bucks, and if you're in a pinch and you need a replacement, thinking about $10 versus $100 or $150, $10 is an incredible deal. So now I've made a screenshot of all of our light projections, and the top row is our low beams and the bottom is our high beams. Starting at the left, we have our standard bulb, then the HW Star, then the JG, and then the Ovotor. On the standard bulb, I realized the light wasn't aimed perfectly. You can see the beam is actually shining up at my shop door. So despite this fact, these bulbs are horrible. So they score a 2 because they are less than desirable. They're not safe. On high beams, they're acceptable. So that scores a 3. And moving on to the HW Star, this probably has the crispest cutoff line that I was talking about. So you're not gonna blind oncoming traffic. And on the low beam setting, it's illuminating all of that ground in front of you really well. So it gets a 5. It's just super bright. It's concentrated to the areas it needs to be and not where it doesn't. And I was just blown away by the visibility I had with my low beams here. Switching to the high beams, it does a great job. It's way better than a standard bulb. You can see all of the gate and it goes a little bit above the gate. So it gets a 4 here because it's pretty good. So with our JG light on low beam, you can see it's an extremely narrow band of light. Comparing to all the rest of the low beams, this thing has black on half of the screen here. So on the bottom, I don't know why they cut it off so much, but that's where you're gonna want your light when you're driving in a foggy or a rainy situation. But they do have a nice crisp cutoff line at the top, so you're not blinding oncoming traffic, which is pretty important with these cheap Chinese LED replacements. So these get a 3. On the high beam side, you still don't get that bottom area filled in, but they go way beyond the gate into the field across the road, and I was blown away at the high beam performance. So they do score a 4 here, but these are not lights I would want to drive with my low beams on very much. So with the Ovotor, their cutoffs are kind of sloppy. They do have a nice crisp line at the top, but the bottom is where it gets kind of sloppy. So you can actually see light scattering all across the bottom 2/3 of the page there. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That allows you to see more versus the JG where it does cut it off and you have this very narrow band. So they score a 4 here because it's not quite as good and concentrated as the HW Star, but it's wider and more usable than the JG. So I put it in the middle. And then for the high beam pattern, it also scored a 4 because it does still maintain that cutoff line at the top, but it's bright at the lower portions, so I can see deer coming from the sides, and it does get above and beyond that gate as well. So final thoughts here for the side-by-side comparisons. The HW Star is the clear winner to me. It's got a very clean cutoff. It's got very bright concentration in all the right areas. So here are our total scores all tallied up. So the HW Star comes out on top by a long shot versus the JG. It's the middle priced light, so you get a very good value for what you're paying. And then there's the Ovotor, which is the lowest priced light in the group, but it comes with the most extra products, so it's got the greatest value per the price, and it does an acceptable job all the way around with its light output, so it comes in at a close second place. I don't think you can go wrong with either of these top two LED replacements. I think they're both going to make you very happy. In third place, we have the standard bulb. The 5 for the replacement price is what propelled it to a third place position. Obviously, it does an acceptable job for being a standard light. It's just not really going to wow you, and it's not going to be the best option if you're driving on those long stretches of open road where you can have your brights on. In last place is the JG. It's funny because I'm the one that came up with the scoring system, and it took me a while to accept the fact that it scored 4th place, but it makes sense. It costs the most. You don't get anything extra. All you get is the lights. The low beam is pretty lackluster. I was expecting a lot more from the low beam output. The only good thing about it really is the high beam output. So for costing the most, almost twice as much as the Ovotor, it really doesn't deserve to be anywhere but last place. I have several more vehicles that require new 7x6 replacement lights, and I plan to replace all of them with the HW Stars. So just some final thoughts here. If you're doing a Toyota, they have a switched ground, so you're gonna have to get basically an adapter harness to plug in to the light and then into your harness. It's like 20 bucks. So if you buy these expecting them to just plug in and work, they're not going to, so don't be freaked out there. On a Jeep or a square body Chevy, they should just plug in and work. Another big thing to consider is if you go to one of these LEDs, if you only need one replacement, you might not be able to get that single replacement. You might have to buy it in a pair, so check that before you decide on a type of light, because obviously you don't want to be running around with 2 different style of headlights. It's like wearing 2 different socks, and that's just weird. You can obviously go to any AutoZone in Napa and get a standard Wagner or General Electric sealed halogen bulb for like 10 bucks, and it's going to be close enough to work. So that is one major plus for the sealed halogen. Now typically you'll replace lights in pairs, but say you have a bird or a rock go through one of your lights and you have to replace one, spending $90 to $150 to get just one replacement, it's going to be kind of steep. So it's definitely something to consider. Now, one other thing is maybe you have a dedicated vehicle driving for the day and another one you drive at night, and that's actually the case with myself. So I could care less about what headlights go on my daily driver. Honestly, I'd rather have something that looks cool, you know, just the aesthetics of the headlight are more important than actually the actual light output. So if that's the case, there's really no reason for you to be watching this video, because you shouldn't really care what the light output is. Just pick one that looks cool and go with it. And to wrap things up, I'll be running all 3 of these lights on 3 different vehicles that I drive all the time. So if and when they ever fail, I will give a follow-up. It's hard to say if these lights or the manufacturers are even going to be around when these lights finally give out, so it might not even be relevant at that point, but I do plan to give a follow-up if any of them go out. And I've seen some go out in less than a month, so fingers crossed they all last a long time. And with that, thanks for watching another informative video brought to you by Doomsday Diesel. If you liked what you saw here today, you like some of the other stuff you see, hit the subscribe button. We got videos coming out every week. With that, we'll catch you in our next one. Thanks.